Growing up, I had always thought that I wanted to be a lawyer or judge or something in the legal field.
As I got older, I realized that the world was becoming ever more computerized.
I was looking for an internship position. Currently, I play a lot of Xbox. You would say that I just wanted to hang out with computers.
The last day in university studies, I was walking down the hall and it just came across a flyer that says, CA is recruiting for a new development center in Prague.
Most of the kids that we were recruiting over the last year had very little mainframe experience whatsoever.
If somebody had asked me what's a mainframe, I would have had this image of some guy in a lab coat with a clipboard.
My perception started to change as the box didn't look so big.
I think it has a future because most of biggest companies use mainframes.
They really do get it. They understand that the mainframe's not going anywhere, that it's secure, that it's the answer.
They're used by big banks, government agencies.
Corporations, enterprises cannot exist without their mainframes. This is not tinker toy land. This is real, rigorous, great software called mainframe.
I didn't realize that mainframes were actually behind most of the modern economy.
All of us here are at the same age or similar age. We have people from Europe, people from Asia.
They don't have to wear any long sleeve shirts with ties, but we're very casual here. As long as they're wearing something, that's good enough.
People who work on mainframes tend to be more fun than people working on distributed systems.
It's nice to know that you can work and play and still enjoy yourself.
Since I started working on the mainframes in CA, everyone I worked with that was more experienced just didn't hold back.
Everyone is very friendly and helpful.
I had a great mentor when I first started. As good a mentor as I could have ever asked for. He was like a big brother to me. So for me to have an opportunity to give that back to help one of these young kids right out of school, that's something I'm really excited about.
It's a great and challenging career path for the new guys. And I think the kids are ready to accept that challenge.
I like the fact that every single day I learn something new.
I see these guys, they're going to literally build themselves a career that's going to span the next 30 plus years. It's just too good of a platform to go away.
Wonderful. I want to thank Share. It's absolutely an honor for us to get the opportunity to talk to you today. So thank you very much. I want to briefly go back to the video that you just saw. There was one of the people there named Ahmed who said that mainframers are more fun. Is that true? Yeah. And it's somewhat humorous, but there's some insight to be gained by that little remark, that if we're going to compel the next generation of workers to the mainframe and get them committed to this platform, we've got to make it fun again. We've got to make it exciting again. And if you think back to your careers way back when, that's what drew you to think about the mainframe. That's what compelled you to understand it. That's what got you invested, if you will, in terms of your career to make 30 years out of this and create all the good that you've done. In a sense, we got to get back to that kind of inspiration. So before I get into, the how of empowering, I think it's important, if you could go to the next slide, to just briefly kind of go through the market, the mainframe market, obviously. And I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm doing that because I think it's important to set that context as to why empowering the next generation is absolutely not just an important thing to do, but the critical thing to do in 2009. So let's talk about the good of the market. I talk around the world. I've been I think, to every corner of the planet here 3 times in the last couple of years. And I talk about the renaissance of the mainframe, the revival of the mainframe, the fact that over the last 8 years, this thing has grown substantially. And for people that are close to it, they have a sense of it, and they agree. But people that have 1 degree of separation, 2 degrees of separation, look at me in a confused way. Like, what are you talking about? How could it possibly that the mainframe is back? It's better than it ever was. So I want to give you kind of some historical perspective as to why people slightly removed from this market can think things are in a much different state than they are today. So if you go back to around 1990, it was kind of the greatest degree of success for the mainframe around that time in terms of its market share. And market share for mainframe, just to be clear, is for every server, for any server that's above $100,000 in cost. So a large N HP, a large N Sun is in fact a mainframe. So IBM, to a degree, was at the pinnacle of success or nearly there. But there were some significant ills about the platform that a reasonable person could look at and say, this is not necessarily what we want to be on for the future. Cost was a big issue. The customers saw over time that the price performance of the platform wasn't improving in ways that they would expect given the additional use of the platform. They saw, from a user perspective of IT services, a mounting backlog. And if you're on the business side and you're competing in markets which there's competitive forces coming in using technology, or you see opportunities to do something bigger or better, and using technology as the means, and the response is you got to take a number. And that when that number finally gets called, it takes years to deliver. There gets to be a degree of dissatisfaction that companies like Sun and HP can use as a way to say that can't be the path to the future. Things like the internet added fuel to that fire, and you saw the mainframe's market share deplete or go down drastically to the point that IBM as an organization was in trouble in the early 90s. But to the credit of the industry, and specifically IBM, they did a lot of things on the hardware side to start to improve the price performance during that span of time. But what did happen from 90 to 2000 is that customers pruned the platform. The applications that ran on it, a single user stock system as an example, that just don't need the strength of these virtues, came off. And it basically had a settling that what was there absolutely needed all these virtues to be present. And when you start thinking about people that during that span of time that again got removed from understanding these virtues, didn't appreciate them, didn't understand them, you get a lot of people that have, strategic remorse, buyer's remorse, that they made major efforts to take significant workloads off the platform. They were highly transaction intensive, and they've been nightmares. It's not publicized, I guess, in the press, but it's well known in the government sector that there's an organization that spent nearly $1 billion trying to take a base of applications off the mainframe for which there's no end in sight, and actually the people that are there currently managing the project don't even know why it was initiated. If you took $1 billion and put it against your mainframe workloads, you could make this thing levitate and do the Irish jig. So you start to get a sense that in not fully understanding what you've achieved on the platform, the scale of discipline, the scale of automation, the scale in terms of the hardware technology, in terms of where it's got, the scale in terms of what this thing has actually become in 2009, and in not knowing what the distributed side is capable of, you can make some bad decisions. And again, I won't go through other examples, but there's many of them. So what happened in 2000 is the market as a whole, there's anomalies, but the market as a whole stabilized. And the customers started to understand that, in having gone through Y2K and making a reinvestment in applications, that there was $1 trillion of application investment on this platform. What was there needed to be there. So things stopped, and they settled, and they started to grow. And between 2000 and 2008, the mainframe workloads, which are measured in MIPS, went from 3.5 million in 2000 to 14 million in 2008. Beyond that, because 2008 basically takes us up to when the Z10 was introduced, which is, and again, from 3.5 million to 14 million, it's 20% compounded annual growth. In 2008, that growth rate actually went up to something like 25%. At a time when we were sitting in the largest recession that we've seen in many generations, and where pundits were saying that given that this economy is falling apart, in the banking sector, the financial sector, and they tend to be the largest users of the mainframe, that in fact this is going to hurt the mainframe in a big way. That absolutely didn't come true. That the banks who eventually won the game, or the ones in the surviving members, have tended to use the mainframes even more aggressively and actually start to consolidate workloads to those platforms. So this recession has actually been good for the mainframe, and people to stop, relook at its virtues, and start to use it in a bigger and grander way. So I want to talk about some of these virtues. I won't go through all of them. I do want to talk about cost a little bit. It always comes up. And, I've been told by the larger customers that they've been here at Share, and actually in the last few years, and they've done presentations on the fact that they've gone through a very, very aggressive accounting, making sure that, that the dollar figures are attributed correctly to both mainframe and distributed. And they've made the case to you all that the mainframe is half the cost per transaction, half the cost per user. And that's well known, I think, within the largest users of the mainframe. The thing that's actually making it more clear to me in terms of this, and actually making it more clear to some of the larger customers, they're actually starting to look now at the cloud as an alternative specifically for application development, as an alternative to distributed provisioning of servers to basically be able to support that activity internally. So they're going to some of these vendors in the cloud and asking, what do you charge per CPU hour? And the going rate is about 10 cents per CPU hour. Actually, an investment firm in Manhattan went through the due diligence of looking, what can we do that on the distributed side ourselves? And it ended up being about 4 cents per CPU hour. So they're still able to do it cheaper internally than with the cloud. Now, those dynamics will play out over time. But they went to the next extreme. Even though the cloud is really not something that equates to the mainframe today, they wanted to find out what does it cost per CPU hour on the mainframe. And it was less than a cent. So you look at this, the innovations in the cloud and all the things that it's professed to be, and cost is a major element in terms of its value proposition, and the mainframe is a tenth that cost. So those are all good things as it relates to the platform for customers on the high end. But to be honest, the more interesting story is not there, because they get scale to their advantage. It's what's happening on the lower end. And there's a wonderful story about Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota. I'd like to share it with you. Hopefully nobody from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota is upset. But it's a wonderful story of an organization being conscious of their business objectives and making sure that IT was doing everything it possibly could to align. So Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, its charter is to sell health insurance in the state of Minnesota, either people who are residents of it or, in fact, corporations that are based there and their employees. They don't have, and again, they have to compete against the national providers, so they don't get the advantages of scale that the other providers do that actually have a national base. So from the CEO's perspective, he's fanatical, and he should be, that we've got to do everything we can to reduce the cost per member served. Everybody in every part of the organization has to think about it. Because think what happens to them. When the recession comes and their customers are forced through the recession to let people go, they get paid per member served. So they're going to get less revenue as a result. And they can't go to Wisconsin. They can't go to Iowa, in a sense, to broaden their market to make up for that which is lost. So they've got to do everything they can to save money. They have an infrastructure that uses SAP, actually, to run their business from an ERP system. They actually deployed that many years ago. When they did, the decision was to do it in a client-server way. So the database server runs on DB2 under ZOS. The application server runs on an Intel platform. At the point in time where they had to upgrade the application, which would include that you'd have to upgrade the hardware, an executive within IT said, hey, let's stop and let's take a look at this thing. Conventional wisdom is that you just do what you've always done and you upgrade in place. But hey, we live in a business that needs us to be thinking about everything we can do to save money. So they went and did the hard math. And this is a shop that's something less than 4,000 MIPS. This is not 150,000 MIPS. This is a smaller end mainframe shop. They did the hard math, and the decision was to consolidate SAP into a single box, effectively creating a data center in a box where, again, DB2 is the back end, but the application server now ran in Z Linux. So obviously they got the benefits of cost, which drove the decision, but they got a lot of other benefits as well. The people who supported ZOS, from a system programmer perspective, were trained to be able to extend those skills into VM and Z Linux. So there wasn't a cost, if you will, incrementally from a human capital perspective. Things like the network are all inside the box. So the simplification that's gained, the increase of efficiency that's gained is very, very compelling. Things like disaster recovery, where they would struggle in bringing up the distributed side, now they bring it up in 90 minutes, in full form. Half hour to basically bring it up, an hour for verification testing. So all of these things relate to the powers of this platform, and people seeing it in the low end in terms of its value and being able to do things that can't be done from a distributed perspective. I want to talk about Green for a minute. I've had this job for, I think, a year or 2 years and a quarter. And Green was something that was coming up. Lean, Mean, Green, I think, was the spiel from IBM. You know, the mainframe clearly is the leanest platform in the data center. But when I heard those things 2.5 years ago, I thought, I live in a society that's, disposes of everything. I can't believe that's going to be a compelling issue for customers in thinking how they should run IT. And I clearly was wrong. And I want to just kind of give you a story that kind of shows what's driving, Green not to be just good for the ecology, but good for business. So I recently was in Brazil, and I went on a data center tour. And it was a fancy data center. I mean, this is a big shop. This is a 150,000 MIPS kind of shop. I go through the double doors. They weigh you to make sure that you don't take anything out, I guess, that you brought in. They think I'm going to take a mainframe out in my pocket. I don't know what the... But you go in, and I do the data center tour, and it's impressive. And I get to the end, and as people always do to the guy who's the general manager of the mainframe business unit, they say, hey, this is a stack of blade servers. They cost nothing, as opposed to that mainframe that your software runs on that costs millions. And I just started to think about the irony of that remark. Because if you take like 10 steps back from where we stood, you are in a forest of servers. We're standing in a data center that probably could hold 6 football fields. And it's not their only data center. They have another one of the same side next door. And a month before I was there, they broke ground on the third. The walls of this data center are 2.5-foot poured concrete walls. The cords under the floor, they actually picked it up. I mean, they could have filled the Mississippi River. You started to see the scale of all of this stuff. And this thing doesn't look so free anymore. As opposed to the 7 mainframes that they had that sat on probably a 12 by 12 foot footprint. The optics of that are not lost on a CFO. The optics of that are not lost on a CEO. And just to kind of give you a CEO's perspective in kind of seeing this physical reality of what's occurring, I presented to a CEO of a trucking company. And he was not a technical guy, and he kind of shared his perspective after the discussion. He goes, I go down to the data center, and I see all those cords. And I'm not technical, but those to me are all points of failure. And I see the scale, how horizontally this thing's growing, and it just makes me so mad every time I get a proposal to add even another square foot of data center floor space. And increasingly, I look at that mainframe that people told me was part of the past, and I'm saying, it does so much. Why don't we do more with it? Why don't we do more with it? So again, in encapsulating the good of this mainframe market, as I stand here today, these virtues are as strong as they've ever been. In fact, they're stronger than they've ever been. I gave the example of cloud versus the mainframe. And that I see nothing but good coming. And you should all feel proud about where we've gotten to this point. But there's a but. And there always is a but, I guess. So this takes us to the bad. The good, the bad. I'll get to the ugly. You worried about the ugly? I'm worried about the ugly. Oh, Brian, there you are. Was that okay? Brian from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota. It was a nice story. I was in Melbourne, and I presented to a group like you. Basically, it was the Mainframe strategy. At the end of it, this guy walks up to me, and he said, I work for a Australian-based distributed outsourcer, not a mainframe outsourcer. And he said, I'm the GM for what is a new business within our company. It's a SaaS provider, software as a service. They're looking at applications they can effectively sell in that method or form. And I looked at him kind of confused. Why in God's earth would you come to the mainframe presentation? But he taught me a lesson. So he goes through that in my business and in creating this business, the things that I am struggling with are security, multi-tenancy, being able to scale, being able to do virtualization at a level that's better than what my clients can do, so the economies are better for us than them. And he went through basically all these points. And he goes, if the mainframe is so good at all of that stuff, as good as you profess it is, and I know all the struggles I'm having in being a SaaS provider, why aren't there people doing these things on mainframes? So if you could go to the next slide. So, before I kind of go into this point, and I relate this everywhere I go, that in the history of IT, never have so many owed so much to so few when it relates to people that work on the mainframe. Because if you look at the mainframe human capital, even though the workloads have grown by fourfold or more than that over the last 8 years, the number of people who actually work on the mainframe is less today than 2000. And I challenge customers in general, tell me one thing in your business that's quadrupled and the number of people that actually support it has gone down. It's an amazing achievement. But it hasn't been achieved without risk. Because what has happened, and this is something that's happened everywhere I go. You can go to Japan, you can go to Brazil, you can go to South Africa, you can go to Zurich, you can go anywhere. You can go to Wichita, you can go to Topeka, you can go to anywhere. And what has happened is that in the fact that people thought that those people with 2 degrees of separation didn't see necessarily a future for the mainframe, that it was at best in a maintenance mode, at worst, I guess, as a declining element of the business, that when people left the company, either for retirement or just changed a new job, they didn't backfill it. And now when you go to organizations and you ask a simple question, what's the average age of the people that support the mainframe platform? You'll usually hear 55. But if you're an organization that's in downtown Chicago, it's actually 62. 62 for a platform that in their case runs 90% of their business. That mainframe goes down. If it goes from 5 nines to 4 nines to 3 nines, it is cataclysmic for their business. And the people that are most key, that understand kind of the architecture, what has been done, and the implications of change, and are the ones that always know to say no, don't put something in there, it's not ready, those people are at the threshold of ending their career. And what it comes back to me from a CIO perspective, and this has gotten more aggressive as time has gone on, they say things to me like, Chris, this is the real Y2K. Y2K came and went, nothing happened. If Bob, Sally, Jim leave, and we got a problem, it's going to be cataclysmic. I've also been challenged by people to say, you cannot put us in a position where we are chasing the last remaining ZOS skills on the planet. This thing is too important, too critical. And if you don't give a way to introduce disruptive technologies to allow a next wave of people to take responsibility for this platform, I'm going to have distributed people coming into my office and saying, hey, you know what? You're right. We are more costly. We're not as good at the virtues that I just put up there. But the thing is, there's thousands of us, and there's none of those people left. You can't put me, and that's the challenge to me, you cannot put me in that position. So I'm starting to try to show you the scale of this problem. It's not only an issue in terms of the viability of that which it is, It's an issue in terms of that which it can be, which I think there is a much grander opportunity from the mainframe than exists today. So I want to go to the ugly. There was a story a research report by a company called Randstad. I don't like them very much. I don't know who they are. But analysts are starting to reference this document, and I'm getting it when I'm being interviewed. The document is about the dynamics and the trends as it relates to employee trends. And in that document, there's a section that talks about the generational issues. It talks about the Generation Y and the baby boomers and all that stuff. But they have an ominous finding in this paper, and it says that the transfer of knowledge from the experienced people that are on the threshold of retiring, the gurus, if you will, of the mainframe platform, and transferring that knowledge to the next generation, the people who are now coming into the workforce, is unlikely. That's the ugly. So we could go to the next slide, please. Are you bummed out? We can get through this. Hang with me. I don't believe that at all. And I think we have an opportunity to be an authority on this subject. That first video that you saw was all new mainframes and their mentors. That's basically what you saw. And we've hired now 140 college graduates, or recent college graduates, or people who have made a decision to change their careers and go into the mainframe. And I'm telling you, these people have gotten me pumped up and excited because through them, I see what the future can hold. And I learned an invaluable lesson when I met with the high performers. Initially, when I took this job, we had maybe 25 or 30 of them when I initially took the job. And I went, actually, we started in Prague. We've expanded this now to the United States. We hired our first 21 college graduates in the United States, and we actually just put them through boot camp, and now they're part of our development organization. But I went to Prague, and I just asked them, because when you go to Prague, you have our facility, and across the courtyard, you have Sun. And they do Java development there. So I asked these people, why did you take a left to be a mainframe programmer as opposed to a right and be a Java programmer? It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I was kidding. I just wanted to see what their reaction was. But I was shocked at what they said back to me. That, in fact, in this job, we're doing innovative things, cool things, for a platform that is pervasively used and basically is the thread of this economy. And I, as a 25-year-old, am being mentored by people who have learned, have forgotten more than I will ever learn. And my opportunity to escalate my career dwarfs that which my buddies can do across the courtyard where they're one of 1,000. They're one of 1,000. So I definitely believe what Randstad said is not true. We are a case in where that transformation can happen. But there's also another factor that I think is really the critical thing in terms of how do we get these new generations of people to embrace this platform and become enabled on it. And this is changing the conversation about it. And given I'm mature, I need to apologize too. I often find myself constantly defending the platform. It's like I'm answering the question, Chris, when are you going to stop beating your wife? I'm always put in a position of weakness in terms of making the argument for it. And we need to change that conversation to be not about that which it was, but about that which it in fact can be. And it's important for not just the new recruits, it's important for the overall business, and I'll get in that more in a second. And and just going back to the college kids, if the arguments that you're making with them as to why they should take these careers is about that which it's become, right? That it's gotten all these great virtues and all that kind of. To be honest, they don't care. They care about what's going to happen from this moment forward. And when you really think about what they care about, it's about growth. And if you think about what I'm about to say, it directly relates to how you probably felt when you started your career in the mainframe. They needed growth in terms of career opportunity. They need to see it. They need to see a sense of growth in taking what they've learned and the skills that they've developed and taking them up to the next level, right? Not learning something drastically different, but learning something, in fact, that equates to that which they know. And just to make that point, and one of our customers actually gave this to me, is that, if you take a 25-year-old and you put them in front of a green screen, it's like putting a vampire in front of garlic. They can't run away fast enough. And if you think about it, the paradigm that they've grown up on is that everything that they're in front of when they work at a computer, and they've always had a mouse in their hand. They've never had a computer in front of them that didn't have a mouse in their hand. They work into this world in an intuitive way where they don't need manuals and massive training, but then they learn the details behind the scenes afterwards. That's just the paradigm that they've grown up in, as opposed to what you had to grow up in, where you had to read everything, spend weeks and weeks before anybody would let you do anything important as it relates on the mainframe. So they need to see growth in the context of their paradigm, and they need to see growth in terms of being able to do bigger and better things in time. Right? It can't be that my job is to maintain that which is part of the past. I got to do neat stuff. I remember my first job after I graduated from college with a computer science degree. Went to Honeywell, and the first thing I had to do was take somebody else's code and fix it, document it, do some modification. The first thing you were thinking about that first day is, how do I get out of this situation? So they have to see a path to growth. And if you think about those three things and the means to them, these graduates are not stupid. They're smart people. Part of what I'm doing is going to college campuses and speaking and trying to get people excited about mainframe careers. And a good example is at West Texas A&M, and there's a professor, Hyduke, there. I think there's a student from West Texas A&M here today. Oh, and then you're here too? Okay. Wonderful program, wonderful dean for the computer science department. They had 150 people at this event or something. It was a great crowd. But I'm telling you, there was high school kids in there that asked me some of the hardest questions I've ever asked in a public audience. They are sharp, and they know exactly what they're talking about. And they know that the growth that I'm talking about will only come through innovation. Innovation is the lifeblood of growth, and they get it. If you don't show the mainframe in a different paradigm, something that's more innovative, that people will not be drawn to listen, people will not be compelled to understand, and they definitely won't invest their careers in the future of this platform. So this has got to be an agenda of innovation. So in trying to give a picture to that, and other than just talking about it, and I mean innovation specifically, we've made the decision to show it to you. So I've got two of my colleagues. Scott Fagan is going to be the first one, if you can come up. And just to give you an understanding what we're trying to show here, and if I can kind of theme the scene of this, it's like the Carousel of Progress at Walt Disney World. And the Carousel of Progress is this round building, and on the outside it spins. In the middle, the stage stays fixed. And the purpose of it is to show you the way things were, the way things are today, and the way things can, in fact, look in the future. And again, the debate, in my mind, has to be less about defending the platform to now talking about what, in fact, the future could look like. So we're really trying to show you an envisioned state, things that are ways the mainframe can look years from now. The first demonstration by Scott is actually going to be changing the way you manage the life cycle of mainframe software. The second demonstration that we're going to do is actually showing you a new metaphor for actually using technologies. What Scott's going to show you, part of this is in general availability, much of it is not. So again, it is a picture into the future. What we'll show you in the second demonstration has actually never been seen in public before. We're introducing it to the world for the first time today. So in having Scott actually take us on this future stop of the Carousel of Progress, take it away.
So you gave me 15 minutes to install, deploy, and configure a product?
So here's the challenge to Scott. Lex, here's the challenge he's got. In 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Not 15 minutes.
You're not making this fun.
In 10 minutes, you got to install, deploy, and configure some mainframe software.
I have to take my jacket
And even
off.
if I interrupt you and ask you a question, you still got to do it in 10 minutes.
I got to take my jacket off. It's not going to happen.
So, and just ask, how long would it take to do this normally, on average? Give me a guess.
Anywhere from a day to a week.
All right, so go ahead.
All right, well, I'm up there. Okay, so I got to find the product, right? So what I'm doing is I'll install Detector, the new version. I will go over here and find the installation object. And I will save steps by using cut and paste instead of typing. Another thing you can't do on 3270. And so what I'll do is I'll do a brand new install, creating a new SMPE CSI. Now, most of this information has been provided by the product itself, so that it does install cleanly and doesn't require somebody to go through a boatload of sample JCL to get the product installed. And what I'm really entering are the things that would be site specific, that that everybody would have. So an experienced person would be able to write these things down on a piece of paper, put them in an email. Probably an email would be better at this point. Cut and paste them into here. And that's precisely what one of our testers back at Islandia did. He actually got his 11-year-old son to log on from home and install a product, and he did it in 11 minutes.
And it's conceivable that could happen because it's an intuitive interface. It's consistent with the paradigms that they know.
Right. So again, right. So now the product, the tool itself has pulled forward all the information. So if you basically live within the defaults or reasonable settings, you're okay, right? And again, all this information has been pulled up from the product itself. So now we go off and create the distribution zone. Again, the data are all pulled forward. These are all the data sets. You can, if you want to customize your install, change these things. Here's the summary. Because you've only given me 10 minutes instead of 15, we'll go right past that.
So tell me a little bit about this application.
So this application is basically 95% Java. It runs in Apache Tomcat in ZOS. There's no third-party box in the middle. It was written basically for 20-somethings by 20-somethings. Some of the background technologies we used, some of our more experienced people, guys from Islandia, Plano, up in Lisle. And so we basically had a kind of a mixed team of young people and some of us more. I mean, I'm getting gray hair now too. I'm not sure if that's because of the project or because of my family. It's probably a mix. But so the net was we basically did this in an agile method, right? We kind of spun up each piece one at a time, a couple of week increments. And then we showed it to the people who do the work back in Islandia and some of our beta customers, and to get feedback to make sure that it works in a way that's reasonable. Some of the things here, obviously, I'm blowing past all the results, but all of the results are available in the tool, so that somebody who's more experienced could actually go back and check the results to make sure things work correctly, or somebody who is just learning how this stuff worked would be able to go in and dig into all the little GIM messages or the IDCAMS messages that have been emitted by the process. So now the product is actually now installed on the SMPE driving system. So now I have to pick it up and move it.
And this is a wonderful example of the potential for application development in the mainframe, let alone what you've just shown. It shows you through using newer development techniques like Agile, involving a younger generation that can bring, in a sense, a dimension to this, making sure that we have the people that have been around for a long, long time, making sure we're making all the right architectural decisions, that in a very short period of time you can deliver a major application, which debunks the myth that people have about the mainframe from the 1990s, where it takes forever to get things done, and that somehow the distributed side is in ways better. This is in every way showing people the possibilities of what you can do from an application perspective.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from conception to completion, it was basically 12 months. The real development period was, less than 9. I think we got it done in about 8.5 months.
You're running out of time, mister.
Yeah, you better. You're not making this fun. All right, so the product has been installed, and I need to go off and now deploy it. So I will deploy it to our sandbox system back in Islandia, since that's what most people do after they've fully installed a product. So, and then to make things faster, we've set up a template that allows us to generically take a product from one place to another. So that actually saves me a whole lot of steps here. I might get a couple minutes back. And I need to do something to distinguish this from other installations, so I'll set that. Again, now here are all the names of the data sets that will be transformed as they're moved from the driving system to the target system. And now they've all been resolved by looking at the target system values. And I can go and deploy it. So now the system is packaging it up and basically transmitting it over to the target system through FTP.
Hey, just give me a sense, the productivity gains that you would expect to gain for this for both an expert and a novice, what would you say?
Well, for the novice, in many cases, for a number of ZOS products, it's impossible for them to do the work. They just have no facility to understand and be able to modify given the instructions to do the work. Yep. For the simpler products, anywhere for the novice, 90% time reduction in getting the job done. For the experts, the numbers that we got were more in the 80 to 85% range. And in a couple of cases, we, again, with our internal testing of the tool, we actually took somebody who is, very experienced with this sort of methodology of doing things, and he actually beat the expert.
And this is important as the most skilled people, become fewer, that it is very important to reduce the administrative side of the job, if you will, to free up the efforts to take better exploitation of the newest release of the hardware, new features within the technology. So this helps to change the dynamics of being able to use your most productive people in the most productive way.
Right. So now what I've done is, again, this requires a significant amount of changes to the actual product packaging to place the defaults in a way that the tool can pick them up. So there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that makes this go as well. But again, it's the kind of work that is done on the distributed platforms today.
Yep.
So what we've, so again, now I'm taking the instance that's been deployed to System X and I'm now going to configure it. And so I will pick up both pieces of the product, both the base and the actual feature. And go here, and again, to save some steps, I've set up the profiles on the other system. So it will now go off and suggest the right answers to all these questions because we've obviously done detector 11.5, so it's pulling that information in. And so I can now go next. And now I need to set up the additional defaults, and I'm going to save steps and use all the default values. So what this is doing is it's basically creating the JCL, the control files, then the security settings that are necessary to run detector on the target system. One of the things it can't do is it can't figure out which DB2 subsystems to use. So what I will do is I'll set it up to run against our two test systems that are out there. And now we'll go forward. Again, I will blow past the summary, and this will now essentially compile all of the various pieces that are needed to run the product. Now the product is fully configured, it's just not running. So to get the product running, I can instantiate it. And this is where, depending on the site processes, you'd either have this go through and the individuals responsible for the actions would actually go and take each action by clicking on the button. Since this is a test system, I have full authority on that system to do things like set up security and update system parameter files. So I'm just going to launch it and let it go. And so while this is running, it's doing things like changing parmlib, changing the security systems on the security product, making it go, getting the product prepared. So you can kind of see the actions that it's taking as it goes. And so now the product is fully configured and should be running. And when I clear this screen, we should be able to see that. So yes, it's up and running on System X.
Excellent. Excellent. Scott, that was really, really good. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to ask Scott, Jesse to come up. And again, we're trying to go from a dimension of defending that which it was to start enlightening to that which it can be. And people that say that you can't do these things in the mainframe don't know what they're talking about. And in fact, we're now taking what is a life cycle exercise in managing a technology on the mainframe that would take days, weeks, and shortening it down to a few minutes. So we're sustaining all the virtues underneath the covers, but taking in new innovations that actually take the mainframe not to just being the equal of any other platform, but a compounding factor to be far better. So this is the next demonstration we're about to do. You got the wrong screen up here. You got to change screens. We've actually never shown this before. And this is what our envisioned state for not just handling the life cycle of the technology, but actually people who in fact use the technology and manage the mainframe day to day. So Scott, Jesse, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Chris, this is our envisioned state for managing the mainframe platform going forward. And we're using this new metaphor to leverage all of the technology that we have on the backside, but make it available for those Gen X and Y in that new metaphor that you mentioned. And we're taking innovations from numerous computing platforms and technologies and applying them to the mainframe and taking them to the next level. So this envisioned state will allow us to move from why the mainframe to why not the mainframe, and allow us to attract the best and brightest of those college grads and provide additional life and longevity for the mainframe platform. And we're doing this by you mentioned innovation as the means for growth. We have five innovations here that we are leveraging here. We're talking about smart objects for in-context display and actions. We're talking about smart workflow capability. We're talking about rich visual trending and display, smart collaboration with colleagues, as well as contextual guidance. And I'll take you through a use case here of our envisioned state.
And all of those points are well known by people that work within the distributed realm today. Is that true?
That is true.
So you're effectively using words and terminology that are akin to what they would know having come out of college.
But taking that to a whole nother level.
That's what I like to hear. Go ahead.
So this use case. Simon is a DBA. He logs on to his completely customized workspace here. He's responsible for the service level agreements for those DB2 applications. So he logs in as a DBA role. You can see this is a role-based capability where we're showing 4 roles today. Upon entering this workspace, Simon sees that he's got a problem in his payroll application. So Simon's going to go ahead and click on that alert. And this is going to take him to a list of plans that are running as part of that application. And as you can see from the display, a couple of them have come red. Now, in order to get a little bit more information and context with regards to what might be the problem here, Simon's going to go ahead and click on one of our innovations called the visualizer. And he's looking at the various different plans in this application, and notice that 2 of them have gone red. So Simon can mouse over each and decides to click on the pay levels. And inside the pay levels plan, you can see there's a number of packages that are inside this plan. You mouse over each and get a quick view of what the SQL is doing. It looks like pay grade 3 is spiking. So Simon's going to launch in context this rich visual trending and display graph, and notice that there is in fact a spike there. And wanting to understand if this is something new, if somebody made a mistake, he's going to compare this to a previous time period, the same type of workload, and notice that, there was a spike there as well. So there is a problem that needs to be resolved here. So wanting to understand exactly what was causing that spike, Simon goes, this is a rich contextual display with this graph, wants to go and see what was actually running when this plan or when the spike occurred. And you can notice here that this is a payroll application. We're talking about W-2 processing at the end of the year. So it's a year-end process. It's going to be additional activity. But Simon understands this, and maybe some of the younger people wouldn't understand that. So Simon's going to go ahead and, if you look at the breadcrumbs on the back, he's going to go back and click on his chart to get back to his previous step. And also, in collaboration with his colleagues and for his own self, to make a note about what caused this spike. So the next person, maybe a younger DBA that's going in and looking at a problem like this, can go and say, "Oh, well, we understand what that was. It was year-end processing."
So this is smart collaboration, right?
That is smart collaboration,
and it aligns to kind of the Generation Y's perspective of using things like Facebook and Twitter, that they are compelled to use more of a contextual way to talk and communicate rather than even things like email, which they tend not like to use. So it, in a sense, fits with the metaphors that people are kind of gravitating around today.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So Simon, being the good DBA that he is, he notices this spike. He notices that he gets paid on service level agreements, and he wants to make sure that service level agreements are good. So he's going to go back to the beginning here. He's understood what it was, and now he wants to solve this problem. Going back to this list of plans, he can see that the employee's plan is got clearly the boatload of the statements, as well as using most of the overhead on the system. So Simon wants to go in and take a look at those statements. And clearly, after looking at the statements, the fetch that's at the top is consuming most of the CPU time. So in order to solve this problem and to tune this statement, Simon's going to use a smart object. He's going to use a smart explain to get us an idea how we can improve this access path to cause the spike to go away. So the smart explain results come back in context, telling us to create an ascending index on the employee ID column of this table. And over on the right-hand side, you can see that we're projecting that once we do that action, we'll cut that spike down by 50%. So wanting to go ahead and solve this problem, Simon goes ahead and brings up the create index dialog, specifies the attributes of the index, go ahead and execute immediate on that to get that created, and is now finished with this task. And notice at the top of the screen, Chris, the breadcrumbs across the top is encapsulating this action and is allowing this knowledge to be captured so it can be shared with somebody that may be new to the platform. So
providing contextual guidance to people in the future.
Providing contextual guidance and leveraging, that research report that you said it's not likely that we're going to be able to transfer this knowledge. This is a
which I don't believe.
Which you don't believe. And this is a mechanism for us to transfer that knowledge. So in order to do so, Simon's going to go ahead and save that task for future posterity and returns to his workstation, performance problem solved, and his task done.
Excellent. That's fantastic. Thank you. So with that, again, that was the last stop on the wheel of progress, because we got to raise the debate. The debate can't be a defending the past. It's not interesting to people that are going to be part of the future. It's talking about what it in fact can be, and we've hopefully kind of painted you a picture that shows the power that if you take these virtues of the mainframe that still rings supreme within the marketplace, tie it to new innovations and put it together, it creates a compounding factor of value that, one, is going to draw people to the platform to hear about it. It's going to compel these guys to understand that which this presents in terms of an opportunity and drive them to put their careers, just like you do or have done, into this mainframe. So just in ending, we kind of went through. The mainframe is healthy. It's doing great. It's as strong as it's ever been. I think we have an indication of that. I think IBM is an indication of that. But we got a big problem. And we can't put our heads in the ground about it. It's got to be resolved. And you're all part of the answer. That's why that Randstad thing makes me so mad. Because I see, especially in the customers that I visited and within CA, the people that are tied to the mainframe or associated with it, have been for 30 years, care about it so much. They care about its legacy so much that they want to be part of passing the torch. It's an affinity like nothing I've ever seen. It almost makes me want to cry when I actually see it at work and I see one generation, in a sense, taking knowledge to the next generation. We've got to fix this issue. You've got to be part of it. But we've got to be honest. You've got a workforce that's coming in, and they get the game. And they know that growth is the key to wanting them to be compelled to work on this platform. And they also know the lifeblood of growth is innovation. And they need to see something with their own eyes that takes us to bigger and better places. And that's true for high school students thinking about their career and what they're going to do. It's true for somebody in college in terms of the job they select. It is true for a CIO. What we just showed you was an agile mainframe. We've shown you something that, if in fact delivered, again, it's an envisioned future, if delivered, changes people's minds about what this is used for and the possibilities for what it could be used in the future. Changes the debate. It makes an effect on a CEO. That CEO that I said, why can't we do more in the mainframe? You remember that objection before. There's no reason why we can't do more with the mainframe. In answer to that objection of that guy in Melbourne, why can't this be a SaaS platform? There is no reason why this, in fact, can't be the SaaS platform. So as Ahmed said in the video, mainframers are more fun. I think it's just getting funner. and we're just getting warmed up. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you to Share, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. We have one more video.
I don't know. I think they said it's equipment they don't need anymore.
Yeah, I think Rocco said it was some machine from the 60s. I hope he could even move it.
Yeah, I'm sure it uses half of the power grid just to keep this thing going. No wonder they're getting rid of it. They're probably doing that eco-green thing. They want to save our environment.
What are those big old things called?
Can't remember, but it's on the tip of my tongue. Hey, buddy, where's that, mainframe? Where's the mainframe? Wow, this isn't what I expected. Are you sure this is it?
Hey, what's the worst that can happen?
As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, the fiscal results for the next quarter are going to be exactly... Uh-oh.
Just plug it. I got it. Don't ever do that again. That one box controls all of this?
Actually, it does as much work as all of the other computers combined. And we can actually turn on more MIPS and have it do a whole lot more. Run SAP, WebSphere, you name it.
Well, what is all this other stuff for?
I don't know.
If the mainframe really does as much as you say, then why don't we just use it more? Provided we can, keep their hands off it.
We're gonna need a bigger truck.